Have you ever been so broken, so completely and utterly broken, that you could not even find the words to pray, where the tears came faster than the thoughts, where the pain was so deep, so physical, so overwhelming, that your body itself began to feel the weight of it? Have you ever had a night that felt like it would never end, where you soaked your pillow with tears, where the darkness outside your window felt like it was inside you too, where you cried out to God, and the silence that came back felt louder than any answer? Have you ever felt the terror of divine discipline? That frightening awareness that God who loves you is also God who is holy, and that sometimes His love expresses itself in ways that feel like anything but love in the moment. Have you ever been so weak, so tired, so utterly worn out by suffering, that you had nothing left to bring to God except your tear, and your desperate, barely coherent, broken cry, "How long, O Lord? How long?" If you have ever been in that place, if you are in that place right now, then Psalm chapter 6 was written for you. Because David does not write this psalm from a place of strength. He does not write it from a palace of ease. He does not write it from the mountaintop of spiritual victory. He writes it from the valley, the deepest valley, the valley of tears and exhaustion and physical suffering and spiritual anguish. Oh, the valley where the only prayer left is a groan. And yet, from that very valley, from the very bottom of that very darkness, something happens. Something shifts, and by the end of this psalm, the man who began in tears ends in triumph. The man who began with a groan ends with a shout. The man who began saying, "How long, O Lord?" ends saying, "The Lord hath heard my supplication." This is Psalm chapter 6. And it is going to show you that your darkest moment is not your final moment, that your deepest valley is not your permanent address, that the God who allows the night is the same God who brings the morning, and that even when you have nothing left to bring Him but your tears, that is enough. That is more than enough. O Lord, rebuke me not in thine anger, neither chasten me in thy hot displeasure. The very first words David speaks in this psalm are not words of praise. They are not words of declaration. They are words of trembling. O Lord, rebuke me not in thine anger. David is afraid, not afraid of his enemies, not afraid of the armies surrounding him. He is afraid of something far more sobering. He is afraid of the anger of God. And we need to sit with this for a moment, because in our modern world, we have largely lost this fear. We have constructed a version of God who is infinitely comfortable, infinitely agreeable, infinitely tolerant, a God who never expresses anger, who never disciplines, who simply accepts everything and everyone exactly as they are, without any requirement of change. But that is not the God of the Bible. The God of the Bible is a God of perfect love, and a God of perfect holiness, and perfect holiness, when it encounters sin, produces anger. Not a human anger, petty and vindictive, but a divine anger, pure and righteous. The anger of a holy God toward the things that destroy the people He loves, and David knows this anger is real of it. He has experienced the weight of it. He knows what it feels like when God's displeasure falls upon a life, and he trembles before it. O Lord, rebuke me not in thine anger, neither chasten me in thy hot displeasure. Now notice something crucial here. David does not say, do not rebuke me. He does not say me. Do not chasten me. He says, do not rebuke me in thine anger. Do not chasten me in thy hot displeasure. The distinction matters enormously. David is not asking to escape discipline entirely. He is not asking God to pretend sin has no consequences. He is asking, if you must discipline me, do it in mercy, not in anger. Do it in love, not in hot displeasure. Because David knows that there is a difference between the discipline of a loving father and the full expression of divine wrath. A loving father disciplines his child to correct and restore. But divine wrath in its fullness is something no human being can survive. And David is asking, God, deal with me as a father deals with a child, not as a judge deals with a criminal. Have mercy upon me, O Lord, for I am weak. O Lord, heal me, for my bones are vexed. And now David describes his condition, and it is devastating. I am weak. The word in the original Hebrew carries the idea of wilting, of fading, like a flower that has lost its connection to the root and is drooping. David is not just emotionally low, he is physically weakened. The suffering has gone deep enough to reach his body. Heal me, for my bones are vexed, troubled, disturbed, shaken to their very foundation. His bones are vexed. In the Hebrew understanding of the human body, the bones represented the deepest part of a person, the innermost core, the foundation of physical existence. When David says his bones are vexed, he is saying, this suffering has reached my very core. It is not surface level. It is not a passing mood. It has gone all the way down to the foundation of who I am. And this is something that anyone who has experienced deep grief knows. When the pain is real enough, when the suffering is profound enough, it becomes physical. The body carries what the heart cannot hold. Sleepless nights, exhausted days, a heaviness in the chest that feels like a physical weight, limbs that feel too heavy to lift, bones that feel vexed. David is not being dramatic here. He is being extraordinarily honest about the full physical impact of deep spiritual and emotional suffering. And he brings all of it to God, not just the spiritual part, not just the respectable part, all of it. The weakness, the vexed bones, the wilting. Have mercy upon me, O Lord. Not because I deserve mercy, not because I have earned it, simply because you are merciful, and I am desperate. My soul is also sore vexed. But thou, O Lord, how long? My soul is also sore vexed. Now it is not just his bones. His soul itself, his inner being, the very essence of who he is sore vexed, deeply troubled, profoundly disturbed, and then 4 words that contain more raw human pain than almost any other 4 words in Scripture. But thou, O Lord, how long, how long? This is the cry of every suffering soul in every generation. How long will this last? How long before you act? How long before the morning comes? How long before the pain lifts? How long before I feel you again? How long, O Lord? How long? And notice, David does not finish the sentence. He just says, how long, and leaves it hanging. As if he does not even have the strength to finish the question. As if the question itself is all he has left. And this is one of the most profoundly human moments in all of Scripture. Because God does not rebuke David for this question. He does not say, how dare you ask me how long? He does not withdraw his presence, because the question was asked. He receives it, he holds it, he understands it, because the God who created the human heart knows what it sounds like when the human heart reaches its limit, and he is not offended by the sound. Return, O Lord, deliver my soul. Oh, save me for thy mercy's sake. Return. This word, return, tells us something important. David feels as though God has withdrawn, as though the presence he knew, the intimacy he experienced, has become distant. And he cries out, return, come back to where I am. Come back to this dark place. Come back to this broken man. Come back to these vexed bones and this troubled soul. Deliver my soul, not just comfort me, not just encourage me, deliver me, pull me out, rescue me, save me from this pit of suffering. Oh, save me, for thy mercy's sake, not for my sake, not because I deserve it. For thy mercy's sake, save me, because it is in your nature to be merciful. Save me, because mercy is who you are. Save me, not to vindicate me, but to glorify your own merciful character. This is one of the purest and most humble prayers in all of Scripture. It makes no claim on deserving. It offers no bargain. It simply appeals to the mercy of God as its only and sufficient ground all. For in death there is no remembrance of thee. In the grave who shall give thee thanks? Now David makes an argument, an almost startling argument. He says to God, if you let me die, you lose a worshiper. In the grave, there is no remembrance of you. In death, who will give you thanks? This is not manipulation. This is not David trying to leverage God. This is David expressing the deepest desire of his heart, which is not to escape suffering for comfort's sake, but to live so that he can continue to worship, to give thanks, to remember God. The thing David fears most about death in this moment, is not the pain of dying, it is the cessation of worship, the end of his ability to remember God and give thanks. And this reveals the true heart of David, even in his darkest moment, who, even when his bones are vexed and his soul is troubled, his deepest desire is not his own comfort. His deepest desire is to worship, to remember God, to give thanks. And he asks God, let me live so I can keep doing that. I am weary with my groaning. All the night make I my bed to swim. I water my couch with my tears. And now David paints one of the most heartbreaking pictures in all of Scripture. I am weary with my groaning. The groaning has been going on so long that David is exhausted by it, not just by the suffering itself, but by the act of crying out under the suffering. The groaning itself has become a source of weariness. All the night make I my bed to swim. He makes his bed swim with tears. All night, every night. The image is almost overwhelming in its raw honesty. A man lying in his bed in the darkness of the night, weeping so much, so continuously, so deeply, that his bed is swimming in his tears. I water my couch with my tears. He waters his couch like a gardener waters a garden, consistently, thoroughly, completely, with tears. And this, beloved, is not the picture of a man who has lost his faith. This is the picture of a man whose faith is so real, so raw, so honest, that he brings even this even the swimming bed and the watered couch, to God. He does not pretend. He does not perform. He does not put on a brave face for God's benefit. He brings the tears. He brings the groaning. He brings the exhaustion of weeping. All of it. To the God who made him, and this is permission. Permission for every suffering soul reading this today. To bring your tears to God, to bring your groaning, to bring your swimming bed and your watered couch. Because if David could bring his, you can bring yours. Mine eye is consumed because of grief. It waxeth old because of all mine enemies' wife. Mine eye is consumed because of grief. His eyes are worn out from weeping, consumed up. The grief has literally affected his physical sight. His eyes are swollen, red, exhausted from tears. It waxeth old because of all mine enemies. The pressure of his enemies, the constant threat, the unrelenting opposition, has aged him, made him old before his time. This is what prolonged suffering does. This is what sustained pressure does. It consumes, it ages, it wears away, and David describes it without flinching, without softening it, without making it sound more bearable than it is, because honesty before God is not a weakness. It is a form of worship. And then, something shifts right here. In the middle of this psalm, something changes. The tone changes. The language changes. The direction changes. From crying out to declaring. From groaning to commanding. From asking to announcing. Depart from me, all ye workers of iniquity, for the Lord hath heard the voice of my weeping. Did you catch that? The Lord hath heard. Past tense. Not will hear. Not I hope he hears. Not maybe he hears. Hath heard. Something has happened in David's spirit. Between the swimming bed of tears and this declaration, a shift has occurred. A breakthrough has come, not necessarily in his circumstances. His enemies are still there. His bones may still be vexed. His eyes may still be consumed. But something has changed in his spirit. A certainty has arrived, a settled knowledge. The Lord hath heard the voice of my weeping. And notice what God heard, not the voice of his eloquent prayer, not the voice of his theological declaration, not the voice of his praise and worship, the voice of his weeping. God heard the weeping, the wordless, broken, exhausted, uncontrollable weeping. That was the voice God heard. The tears themselves were a language God understood and responded to. The Lord hath heard my supplication. The Lord will receive my prayer. The Lord hath heard. Again, twice in 2 verses. David declares it as if he cannot quite believe it himself, as if he needs to say it twice to let it sink in. The Lord hath heard. The Lord will receive my prayer. Will receive. Future tense now. As if David is saying, not only has he heard this prayer, he will continue to receive my prayers. This is not a one-time breakthrough. This is a restored relationship, a reopened line of communication, a confirmation that the God who felt distant has returned, that the God who seemed silent, though, was listening all along, and will go on listening. Let all mine enemies be ashamed and sore vexed. Let them return and be ashamed suddenly. And now, David closes with a declaration over his enemies. Let all mine enemies be ashamed. The word that David used to describe his own condition earlier. Vexed. He now declares over his enemies, as if to say, what they put me through will come back to them. The vexing they caused me will become their own experience. Let them return and be ashamed suddenly. Suddenly, not after a long drawn-out process. Suddenly. The turnaround of the wicked, when God acts on behalf of his broken and trusting servant, can be sudden, swift, complete, and so Psalm 6 closes. And it leaves us with the most profound journey, from the trembling man who begs God not to rebuke him in anger, through the broken man whose bones are vexed and whose soul is troubled, through the exhausted man who groans all night and waters his couch with tears, through the desperate man who cries, "How long, O Lord? How long?" to the suddenly certain man who declares thus, "The Lord hath heard," to the triumphant man who commands his enemies, "Be ashamed and depart." All in 6 short verses, all in one psalm, all in one journey, from the valley to the declaration, from the groaning to the triumph, from how long to he hath heard, and it speaks to every single person who has ever had a night that would not end, every person whose bed has ever been soaked with tears, every person who has ever groaned under the weight of suffering, every person who has ever cried, "How long, O Lord, how long?" God heard David's weeping. He counted every tear. He received every groan as a prayer. He was present in every sleepless night. He was there, in the darkness, beside the swimming bed, listening to the weeping. And he heard. He hath heard. He will receive, and what he did for David. Because he is the same God yesterday, today, and forever. The God who hears the voice of weeping, the God who receives broken prayers, the God who turns groaning into triumph, the God who takes the how long of the darkest night and answers it with the sunrise of He hath heard. So bring Him your tears tonight. Bring Him your groaning. Bring Him your vexed bones and your troubled soul. Bring Him your swimming bed and your watered couch. Bring Him your how long. Because He is listening. He has always been listening. And He will hear. He hath heard. He will receive. And suddenly, the shame will fall on your enemies. And the morning will come. It always comes. For those who bring their tears to the God who hears. Shuru Kardahun. Step 2. Let us go back to the very beginning of this song. And this time, let us go deeper. Much deeper. because the surface of Psalm 6 is already breathtaking. But beneath the surface, there are layers upon layers of meaning, of history, of language, of human experience that will completely transform the way you understand every word David wrote. So let us begin again from the very first word, and let us not rush, because some truths need to be walked into slowly. They need to be approached with patience, with stillness, with the willingness to stay in one place long enough to let the depth reveal itself. So slow down, take a breath, and let us go deep together into Psalm 6. The very first thing we need to understand before we look at a single word of this psalm is the context in which it was written. Because words mean more when you know the story behind them. David was not a perfect man. He was a man who loved God deeply, who pursued God passionately. But he was also a man who fell, who sinned, who made choices that had devastating consequences. And many scholars believe that Psalm 6 was written during one of the darkest seasons of David's life, a season that came as a direct result of his own choices, his own failures, his own sin. And this context changes everything about how we read this psalm, because David is not crying out as an innocent victim. Here, he is not crying out as a man who has done nothing wrong and cannot understand why. He is suffering. He is crying out as a man who knows, at least in part, that his suffering is connected to his own failures. And yet, he still cries out. He still comes to God. He still brings his tears and his groaning and his vexed bones to the God he has failed. And this is one of the most important lessons of Psalm 6, that even when our suffering is connected to our own choices, even when we have contributed to our own pain, even when we have no one to blame but ourselves, we can still come to God. We can still cry out. We can still bring our tears, because he is not a God who only receives the prayers of the perfectly innocent. He is a God of mercy. And mercy, by definition, is for those who do not deserve it. Now let us look at the title of this psalm. In the original Hebrew Bible, Psalm 6 carries a superscription. It says, "To the chief musician on Neginoth upon Sheminith, a psalm of David." Now, these words may sound like ancient technical language that has nothing to do with us today, but they actually tell us something profound. Neginoth means stringed instruments. This psalm was meant to be accompanied by the deep resonant sound of stringed instruments, strings that carry emotion in a way that no other instrument can. The cello, the violin, the harp, instruments that seem to understand tears, that seem to speak the language of grief. Sheminith means the eighth, and in ancient Hebrew music, the eighth was the lowest register, the deepest octave, the most solemn and weighty musical key. David specifically requested that this psalm be sung in the lowest, deepest, most solemn musical register available, because the content of this psalm required the deepest musical voice possible. It could not be sung lightly. It could not be performed casually. It required depth, weight, solemnity. And this tells us something about how God receives our suffering. He does not receive it lightly. He does not take it casually. When we come to him with our deepest pain, our most profound grief, our most desperate tears, he receives it in the deepest register of his divine attention, with full weight, full solemnity, full presence. He does not minimize what you are going through. He does not tell you to cheer up and move on. He receives your suffering in the lowest register, with all the weight and depth it deserves. Now let us look at the first verse again, but this time, word by word. O Lord, rebuke me not in thine anger, neither chasten me in thy hot displeasure. The word rebuke in the original Hebrew is yakak. It means to correct, to convict, to argue a case against someone. It is a legal term, a courtroom term. David is saying, O Lord, do not bring your case against me in anger. Do not prosecute me in the heat of your displeasure. Now think about what this tells us about David's understanding of his situation. He knows he is guilty. He is not claiming innocence. He is not arguing that he has done nothing wrong. He knows that God has a case against him, that God could prosecute him, that God could bring the full weight of divine justice down upon him, and he is not asking God to pretend the case does not exist. He is simply asking, if you must bring the case, bring it in mercy, not in anger. Bring it as a father correcting a child, not as a judge executing a criminal. Neither chasten me in thy hot displeasure. The word chasten here is yasar. It means to discipline, to instruct through correction. And notice, it comes from the same root as the word for instruction. Chastening and instruction are related in the Hebrew mind. Discipline, properly administered, is a form of teaching. It is not punishment for punishment's sake. It is correction that leads to growth. And David is asking, if correction is necessary, let it be the correcting kind, not the destroying kind. Let it be the kind that teaches me and restores me, not the kind that overwhelms me and finishes me. And then comes the word that holds everything together in this first verse, anger, hot displeasure. These two phrases describe two different intensities of divine response to sin. Anger is the settled righteous response of God's holiness to sin. Hot displeasure is the intensified expression of that anger, the burning, consuming expression of divine wrath in its full force. And David trembles before both, but especially before the hot displeasure. Because David has read the history of Israel, he knows what happened when the hot displeasure of God fell. He has read about the plagues of Egypt, about the fire that consumed those who rebelled against Moses, about the earth opening up and swallowing the rebellious. He knows that the hot displeasure of God is not something a human being can survive in its fullness. And so he cries out with everything he has, rebuke me not in thine anger, chasten me not in thy hot displeasure. Have mercy on this broken, guilty, weeping man. Now let us move to verse 2. Have mercy upon me, O Lord, for I am weak. The word mercy here, in the original Hebrew, is chan, and chanan is a beautiful and profound word. It means to bend down in grace toward someone, to stoop, to incline oneself toward another in favor and compassion. It carries the image of someone powerful and high, bending down to lift up someone weak and low. David is not just asking for tolerance. He is not asking God to simply overlook his condition. He is asking God to bend down, to stoop from his holy height, down to where David is, in the valley, in the weakness, in the vexed bones and the troubled soul, and bend down toward him with grace. For I am weak. The Hebrew word here is amlal, which means to languish you, to wither, to fade like a plant that has been cut from its roots and is slowly dying. David is not just tired. He is not just sad. He is withering. He is in a process of fading, of losing vitality, of diminishing. And he knows it, and he brings it honestly to God. I am withering, O Lord. I am fading. I need you to bend down to me, because I have no strength left to reach up to you. This is one of the most important prayers a human being can ever pray, because it requires the complete abandonment of self-sufficiency, the complete surrender of the pretense that we can hold ourselves together. It requires the humility to say, I am withering, and I cannot stop it on my own. I need you to bend down. O Lord, heal me, for my bones are vexed. Heal me. The Hebrew word is Rapha, and Rapha is a comprehensive word for healing. It covers physical healing, emotional healing, spiritual healing, relational healing. It is the word from which the name Jehovah Rapha comes, the Lord who heals. David is appealing to the healing nature of God, Vu, the part of God's character that moves toward brokenness, with the intention of restoring it. For my bones are vexed. The word vexed here is bahal, which means to be terrified, to be thrown into a panic, to be completely disturbed. David's bones are in a state of panic, now in the Hebrew understanding of the human body. The bones were considered the seat of the deepest inner life. The marrow of the bones was thought to be the very essence of a person's vitality. When the Hebrews said the bones were affected, they meant the very foundation of the person was affected. The deepest core, the innermost essence. So when David says his bones are vexed, he is saying the panic, the disturbance, the terror has reached the very core of who I am. It is not surface level. It has gone all the way down to the marrow, to the foundation. And he asks the healing God, the Jehovah Rapha, to heal him there, at the deepest level, where the panic lives, where the vexing is most acute, where no human hand can reach, but where the healing hand of God can go, and does go, for those who cry out to him. My soul is also sore vexed, but thou, O Lord, how long? My soul is also sore vexed way. Now, the suffering moves from the bones to the soul, from the physical foundation to the spiritual essence. The word soul here is nephesh, which in Hebrew refers to the entire living being, the breath of life that God breathed into Adam, the animating essence of a human person. David's very nephesh, his very living essence, is sore vexed. The panic has reached everywhere. There is no part of David, physical or spiritual, that is not disturbed, not panicked, not vexed. And then come those four words again. Those four words that echo through the centuries, that have been spoken by every suffering soul in every generation. But thou, O Lord, how long? Now, let us look at this question very carefully, because it is not a question of despair. It is not a question of unbelief. It is a question that contains, within itself, the seed of faith. Because notice who David addresses the question to.
Thou, O Lord.
He is not asking the question into the void. He is not throwing it at the universe. He is asking it of God, which means he still believes God is there. He still believes God hears. He still believes God can answer boo. The very act of asking how long, O Lord, is an act of faith, because you only ask how long of someone you believe is listening and can do something about it. And there is something else in this question that we must not miss. David does not finish the sentence, but thou, O Lord, how long? How long? What? How long will you be angry, you? How long will the suffering last? How long before you act to? How long before the morning comes? David does not specify. He leaves the question open, and this may be the most honest and most profound form of prayer possible. When you have been suffering so long and so deeply that you cannot even articulate what you need God to change. You just know that something needs to change, and you do not have the strength or the clarity to specify what. So you just cry out, how long? And trust that God, who knows the end from the beginning, understands exactly what that question means and exactly what answer is needed. Return, O Lord, deliver my soul. Oh, save me for thy mercy's sake. Return, O Lord. The Hebrew word is shob. It means to turn around on, to come back, to reverse direction. David is using the language of someone who perceives that God has turned away, has moved in a different direction, has withdrawn his nearness to, and he is calling out, turn around, come back, return to me. Now we need to be very careful here, because God does not actually abandon his people. He promises, I will never leave you nor forsake you. But there are seasons in the experience of the suffering soul where the felt presence of God becomes very quiet, where the sense of his nearness becomes very dim, where prayer feels like it is bouncing off the ceiling, where the worship feels hollow, where the silence feels louder than anything else. And in those seasons, it is not that God has actually left, it is that the suffering has affected our ability to perceive his presence. Like a thick fog that does not make the sun disappear, but makes it very hard to see. And David, in the fog of his suffering, cries out, return, O Lord Os. Come back into my perception. Let me feel you again. Let me sense you again. Let me know you are here. Deliver my soul. The word deliver is chalatz, which means to pull out, to draw out, like pulling someone out of a pit. Pull my soul out of this pit of suffering. Extract me from this darkness. Draw me up and out and back into the light. Oh, save me for thy mercy's sake. And here is the beautiful humility again. For thy mercy's sake. Not for my sake. Not because I deserve it. Not because I have earned salvation. For thy mercy's sake. Save me, because saving broken people is what your mercy does. Save me, because it glorifies your merciful character to pull drowning people out of deep waters. Save me, not for my benefit only, but for the display of your mercy. For in death there is no remembrance of thee. in the grave, who shall give thee thanks. Now let us look at this remarkable argument. David makes, in death there is no remembrance of thee. The Hebrew word for grave here is Sheol, which in the Old Testament understanding referred to the place of the dead, the realm of departed souls. And David is making a theological argument. In the realm of the dead, there is no worship. There is no remembrance of God. There is no giving of thanks. So if you let me die, O Lord, you lose a worshiper. Now, some people read this and think David is being manipulative, trying to leverage God with an argument. But I believe something much deeper is happening here. David is revealing what he values most in the face of death. What does David fear losing most to? Not his throne, not his wealth, not his power, not even his relationships. He fears losing the ability to worship, to remember God, to give thanks. The thing David treasures above everything else in his life is his relationship with God, his ability to commune with Him, to worship Him, to remember Him. And he says, if I die, I lose that. Let me live so I can keep worshiping, keep remembering, keep giving thanks. And this reveals to us the true measure of a person's spiritual maturity. Not how much they know, not how much they have achieved, not how impressive their ministry or their reputation, but what they fear losing most. For David, what he feared losing most to was worship, and that fear became his prayer. I am weary with my groaning. All the night make I my bed to swim. I water my couch with my tears. I am weary with my groaning. The word weary here is yaga, which means to be exhausted, to be worn out, to be spent. David has been groaning for so long that the groaning itself has exhausted him. The suffering has lasted long enough that even the act of responding to the suffering has become a source of weariness. Have you ever been there? Where you are not just tired from the pain, but tired from being tired, tired from crying, tired from praying, tired from hoping, tired from getting up in the morning and carrying it all again, tired from the very act of groaning under the weight. That is where David is. All the night make I my bed to swim. Let us pause here and really let this image sink in. All night. Not some nights, not most nights. All night, every night, David lies in his bed and weeps so much, so continuously, so deeply, that the bed itself seems to swim beneath him. The sheets are soaked. The pillow is soaked. The mattress itself is wet with tears too. Now in the ancient world, beds were simple sleeping mats or low pallets. The image of making the bed swim with tears is not metaphorical exaggeration. It is a raw and literal description of what prolonged weeping does to the physical space around a person, and David does not hide this from God. He does not clean up the image. He does not make it sound more dignified. He says, this is what my nights look like, bae. A swimming bed, a soaked couch, a man lying in his own tears, all night, every night. And he brings this image to God. He shows God exactly what his nights look like, because he knows that God can handle the image, that God is not put off by the swimming bed, that God does not require us to have our lives together before we come to Him. He receives us in the middle of the swimming bed, in the middle of the soaked pillow, in the middle of the all-night weeping. I water my couch by tears, dew. The word water here is extraordinary, ew. It is the same word used for watering a garden, for irrigating crops, for giving a field the moisture it needs to produce life. David is saying, I have watered my couch with tears, the way a farmer waters his field. Consistently, thoroughly, faithfully, night after night, tear after tear. And there is something quietly profound in this image, because what happens when you water a garden? Eventually, something grows. The water that falls on the soil does not simply disappear. It goes into the ground and does its work and produces life, and the tears that David has poured onto his couch, the tears that seem like nothing but loss and pain and grief, are not wasted. They are being received by the God who collects every tear in a bottle, who counts every one, who knows the weight of every drop, and who will bring from those tears a harvest. In his time, mine eye is consumed because of grief. It waxeth old because of all mine enemies. Mine eye is consumed because of grief. The word consumed here is ashashi, which means to waste away, to be used up, to be worn down to nothing. David's eyes are wasting away from grief. The constant weeping has physically affected his eyesight. His eyes are swollen, darkened, diminished. It waxeth old because of all mine enemies. The pressure of the enemies has aged his eyes, made them old before their time. And this is such an honest description of what sustained suffering does to a person. It ages them, not just spiritually or emotionally, but physically. The grief shows in the face, the pain shows in the eyes, the suffering leaves marks that others can see. And David does not hide this. He brings it to God. The old eyes, the consumed grief, the enemies who have aged him beyond his years. He brings all of it, and then the shift, the magnificent, unexpected, glorious shift. Depart from me, all ye workers of iniquity, for the Lord hath heard the voice of my weeping. Now let us look at what has happened here, because something extraordinary has occurred between verse 7 and verse 8. Between the consumed eyes and the waxing old, and this declaration, something has changed. And what changed was not David's circumstances. His enemies are still there. His bones may still be vexed. His eyes are still old and consumed. What changed was David's spirit. Something shifted inside him. A certainty arrived. An assurance descended. A knowing settled into his heart. That was not there before. And theologians and scholars have wondered for centuries. What happened in that space between verse 7 and verse 8? And the most faithful answer is prayer happened. The very act of bringing all of this to God, the groaning, the swimming bed, the watered couch, the consumed eyes, the aged countenance, the how long, O Lord. The very act of bringing all of it, honestly, rawly, completely, produced something in David's the spirit, a certainty, an assurance, a knowing. The Lord hath heard. And notice the precise language. The Lord hath heard the voice of my weeping, not the voice of my eloquent prayer, not the voice of my theological declaration, not the voice of my praise, the voice of my weeping. The tears themselves were heard, the groaning itself was received, the swimming bed, the watered couch, the consumed eyes, all of it was a voice, a language that God understands perfectly and responds to because He is the God who hears. Not just the polished prayers, not just the articulate declarations, but the weeping in, the wordless, broken, exhausted, desperate weeping. That is heard. That reaches heaven. That moves the heart of God. The Lord hath heard my supplication. The Lord will receive my prayer. The Lord hath heard my supplication. The word supplication here is tchina, which comes from the same root as chanan, the word for mercy we looked at earlier. A supplication is a mercy, plea, a prayer that appeals entirely to the mercy of the one being asked. That makes no claim of deserving, that offers no argument of worthiness, but simply says, I need mercy, and you are merciful, and God heard it. The Lord will receive my prayer. The word receive here is lak, which means to take, to accept, to take hold of. God will take hold of David's prayer. He will grasp it. He will not let it fall to the ground unanswered. He will take hold of it and carry it and act upon it. And this is the promise that echoes through every generation, to every weeping person, in every dark night, in every swimming bed, beside every watered couch. The Lord will receive your prayer. He will take hold of it. He will not let it fall. Let all mine enemies be ashamed and sore vexed. Let them return and be ashamed suddenly, Ellen. And David closes with authority. Let all mine enemies be ashamed. The word ashamed here is bosh, which means to be disappointed, to be put to shame, to have one's expectations completely overturned. The enemies who expected David to be destroyed, who expected God to finish him off in anger, who watched him weep and groan and wither and assumed that this was the end of him, will be ashamed. Their expectations will be overturned. Their assumptions will be disappointed. Because the man they wrote off, the man they surrounded and pressured and aged with grief, is still standing, and more than standing, he is declaring with authority, depart from me, you, be ashamed, you. The Lord hath heard, sore vexed. And notice, David turns the word back on his enemies. Earlier, it was David who was sore vexed. His bones were vexed. His soul was vexed. Now he declares, let them be sore vexed. Let the vexing they caused me return to them. Let them return and be ashamed suddenly. Suddenly. This word is so important because when God acts on behalf of his broken and trusting servant, he does not always act slowly. Sometimes the turnaround comes suddenly, without warning, without a long drawn-out process. One moment the enemies are confident. The next moment, they are ashamed. One moment the suffering seems permanent. The next moment, the Lord hath heard, and the shift comes suddenly. And so Psalm 6 closes, having taken us on the most complete and most human journey possible. From trembling before divine anger, through physical and spiritual suffering, so deep it vexed the very bones. through the how long of the darkest night, through the swimming bed and the watered couch, through the consumed and aged eyes, all the way to the Lord hath heard, the Lord will receive. Be ashamed, suddenly. And it speaks to every single person who has ever suffered, who has ever groaned, who has ever watered their couch with tears, who has ever cried, how long, O Lord? How long? It says to them, your tears are a voice, your groaning is a language, Your swimming bed is a prayer, and God hears it. He hears it all, every tear, every groan, every how long. He collects it all. He receives it all. He takes hold of it all, and in His perfect time, suddenly, the shame falls on the enemy, and the morning comes for you. Because the God who hears the voice of weeping is the same God who turns weeping into dancing, mourning into joy, the swimming bed into a bed of peace, the how long into He hath heard, and He will do it for you, just as He did it for David, because He is the same God. Yesterday, today, and forever, there's the God who hears the God who receives, the God who acts suddenly on behalf of those who bring Him nothing but their tears and trust Him with everything else.